Yeah. Okay. So next point. So thinking particles, what is it? I assume most of you guys have seen it, but quickly for those who haven't, let me just quickly explain, just in a 5-minute thing, what it is and how it's built and how it works. So there you go. Now you can see, right? Sweet. All right. So we're in an empty max. I'll just go to the particle system, create a thinking particles. Okay, so thinking particles consists of 4 major windows, so to say. So first we have a group tree, and in the group tree we create containers that hold particles. So we can create a group for, oh Jesus, colored particles, and then we can put inside, we can call it like, you know, red particles and blue particles, and then we can have another group like you know, black particles, or yeah. So we have a group tree, and then, you know, you can basically say, okay, maybe gray. So basically you're creating groups, and the groups hold particles in there that you wanna have. And the way the group tree works is it goes from top to bottom and puts particles in there, and they're always sorted like from 0 to, you know, incrementally, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. So this is the group tree. You can nest as many groups as you want, and the parent group always contains all of the other groups. So if you ever loop through the black particles, it's going to go through all this groups. And then on the right side, you have a settings, a parameter pane, where, like same as in Max, where you set your settings. So the red ones we can set to red, and then the blue ones we can set to blue. So this is the basic group tree. And then we have the dynamic sets tree. And again, the same as the group tree, we can nest dynamic sets inside and loop through all the particles. And again, it goes from top to bottom, and then goes 1, and then goes inside, and so on and so on. And then whenever you select a dynamic set, you can see there is nodes inside. And basically in these nodes, we can say, okay, generator born, particle born, group red, and sorry, position born, group red, 25 particles per second, and there we go, we have red particles. And if we switch it to blue, we have blue particles. And then we can say, okay, in the next dynamic set, give me the blue particles and apply a force. And the standard force is gravity. And now all the blue particles, actually let's switch it to red so we see that better. Red particles, speed 5. All right, the force is not strong enough. There we go. So as you see, the force is pulling them down. So, and this is basically all that matters in thinking particles. That's it. That's the whole thing. The screen. Anand, maybe you can answer that. So can you guys read the group names here? Okay, cool. Then I'll keep going. So basically that's it. That's the whole intro into thinking particles. All you need to know that there's groups and there's dynamic sets where you can apply rules to those groups. And again, it goes from top to bottom. So if you want to say first apply the gravity down, and then you can say, well, I want all the colored particles to freeze, and now they will all freeze, so they will not be 100%. So they're not moving. But if I apply the gravity after the freeze, well, they're still not moving. But yeah, usually in general, keep in mind, it goes from top to bottom. So sometimes you have something happening, but then something else kind of disqualifies that or applies the dynamic after it, instead of it should have done it first. And then, for example, saving some kind of data, it can be important that you first save it, because later on a dynamic set uses that data. But yeah, once you get into it, you will intuitively learn how to deal with it. And this is how simple it is. All you got is like this little bubbles, and you apply things, and then you can combine these bubbles together to do more complex stuff. And we will see this later. Okay, so this much to thinking particles for now.
Hey Goran, so maybe a question which Subhash is asking, what is the recommended units for TP? So would you?
Well, I don't think there is a recommended units. I mean, a unit is a unit. If you say 1 centimeter is your unit, it's your unit. It doesn't really matter. What matters is, like, if you get really far away from the origin, your precision of the decimals becomes unprecise, basically. So suddenly you get like stepping instead of smooth motions. Like Max, or basically all the 3D softwares, I think, have this problem, that the further you are from the origin, the more problems become, because the numbers become huge, or the numbers become, the decimals becomes like really really long after the comma, and then because of floating point limits, or basically rounding comes in, and basically that's a problem. But now when you're working in real world scale, like for example you have a human character, usually that human character is going to be in real world scale. So if you set up a unit that is like in millimeters, and then you have a character that's like 2 meters tall, or 180 tall, you're having like 1,800, I think, yeah, 1,800 units tall character, and that's a pretty big number. And imagine he starts running around, so you get like really far away from the origin, and you run into problems. So what we did so far in production is usually work in decimals. So your character would be like 18 units tall, and that way you're kind of on a safe side in terms of big numbers going far away from the origin. And you're also safe when you have to do really small effects on him, like let's say on an eye or something. You don't go into really small decimal, like 0.00003 or something. Then you can run into problems. So this is kind of the balance, that it matters like how big your assets are that you're dealing with. But usually I would recommend to work in either decimals or 0.1 meter or 1 centimeter. Decimeters, that's the word I was looking for. All right, great. So, okay, so why is thinking particles good or great, and what does it do best? So as we know, a lot of stuff, with particles is usually destructions, like, stuff crumbling. So it has really cool solvers. It has like a shape collision solver, which is basically an RBD solver, like rigid body dynamics. And then it has a bullet solver, which is also for RBDs, but also for soft bodies and ropes and so on. So it has those two, and also they do really good constraints if you use them correctly. But now in the new TP, there's also, you know, fluid solvers like gas solver and a flow solver. It's called flow solver. It's basically for liquids. You have a viscoelastic solver. So they added a lot of new tools, which I personally haven't had the chance to use them much yet. But I think once it gets, you know, it gets going in the production, we're gonna see amazing new things done with these new additions. I mean, they're really great, and I think just people need to actually like materialize that there is that stuff and that they can use it, and then you'll see like in TP you can basically use certain things that are not necessarily made for, like you can use a liquid solver for doing liquids, but then you can also do like snow, sand, all kind of stuff, like any kind of splash. You can even do crowd simulations because, you know, it separates your particles nicely and quick, so you don't have to do like separation and cohesion stuff. You can basically do that in thinkingParticles. So you can do a lot of things. It opens up a lot of possibilities, and this is the great part about thinkingParticles. Is you can create your scripted nodes. So you have actually, I can stop sharing. You can create your scripted nodes, so you can have custom nodes, which is really powerful. It's a little complex, but it's possible, and basically enables you to do really cool stuff with sharing data between Max and thinkingParticles. There is also like non-scriptive methods, but the script operator enables you to do really cool stuff. And then also TP can be used in production pipelines. It's very well integrated inside Max. It exports Alembic and PRTs, and it loads Alembics and PRTs. So you can share information between softwares, and that gives you another very powerful aspect of it. Okay, so the projects it has been used on. I don't know, the quality is a little bad here, so I'll just make this smaller. I just went through the internet and collected some videos about where I know that TP has been used. It's not necessarily things I did, or even I wasn't even there when it was done, but I know that they have been using that. Yeah, I think Alembic is now inside thinkingParticles. Anyways, you can also always export Alembic as by just selecting thinkingParticles and, you know, caching the Alembic itself, like through the normal Max Alembic exporters. So that works as well, especially when you have like meshes and stuff. This can be very useful. Anyways, let's play the video and have a look. I hope the quality is not too bad. So 300, sorry, this is the wrong video. There we go. So you probably know 2012. Can you see the video, by the way? Good. All right, let's keep going. So 2012 was one of the bigger early big movies that thinkingParticle has been used on, and it was mainly used on the Los Angeles limo sequence. So you can see here. I hope I can go back. So you can see all these houses, every single house was destroyed with thinkingParticles, and it was done by a really like amazing team with like very talented artists. Me and Joe, we were responsible for the ground destruction. So everything in here is thinkingParticles, you know, except the trees. But so then here you have this whole garage on the right side, and then on the left side the freeway, Maybe I can go back. And this is all done procedurally, and was one of the first big projects. So this is really cool. Was very inspirational for me to work on this movie. Here, the two wind buildings in Vegas. The simulations, very early stages of powerful thinking particle simulations, and relatively quickly done. And then the windows shattering on the sides. Here is a project done by some friends at Prime Focus from Final Destination 5. The whole bridge collapsing was done with thinking particles. When I saw it, I was just blown away. Here is work by Scanline, recent work from San Andreas, and they did such an impressive job on this. This is just mind-blowing. If you haven't seen the movie, I mean, just for the effects, go watch it. I mean, this Golden Gate Bridge destruction was epic. It was just so full of detail and so impressive. I was a little jealous not to have worked on it, to be honest. It was just really cool stuff. Then here from Sucker Punch is a demonstration of early joint systems. Was done by Christo Velen. He did the Zeppelin collapse, and it was pretty good looking. Here's a project from P.2, from the new Pan movie. Yes, this is true. It's being used everywhere. It's being used in games. It's being used in game cinematics, commercials. I think I would assume some people even use it in architectural visualization, like when you procedurally need to place trees or anything. So yeah, let me reload this video. Or should we just keep going? The Zeppelin Sucker Punch. So here the boat, which is really interesting. Yeah, it's really interesting. All this metal underneath the boat is all ripping away and bending and deforming, and then the masts bending, and the whole ship is kind of like wobbling and shaking. So this has all been done with thinking particles. Yes, the train crash in Red Tails and the Hindenburg shots all have involved thinking particles. Basically, the work at Pixamondo was done a lot with thinking particles. So far, everything was pretty much destruction, but it can also be used on like magical effects. So here we just have like particles, and we have a lot of elements. And it gives you also the option to do other stuff than just destruction. So here we have fairies, and here we have fairies that emit. Basically, we use thinking particles to emit fire or to be emission for fire. And then also, let me stop this. No, it's again stuck. So we used thinking particles to emit, to have an emitter for fire, for the flamethrowers, but then also we used the flamethrowers and brought back the data from the flames into thinking particles. So the fairies that are being burned and they try to fly away, they react to the fire. We didn't just put like forces, like points in there, we actually make them search for the fire and go away from the fire, which is really cool how you can, you can loop data back and forth. So it gives you a lot of possibilities. It's really well integrated in Max. And then in this shot, right now we don't see it, but there's like little crabs and fish on the beach, which have an animation cycle going. And then the velocities of the particles control how fast the animation cycle is playing back. So you can basically create character animation with thinking particles. It's not as powerful as massive, obviously, but it can do quite a lot, and it's really good, really cool how you can control that and use it in many different ways. Okay, the fire, the little crabs, and then in the next shot we're going to see palm trees, and so okay, we see the palm trees in the back. all of these pollen trees have a bone structure inside, and the bone structure was controlled with thinking particles as well. So basically what you can do is you can, with joints, you can make the trees like sway, and then you have the branches and the fronds and the leaves, and they're all kind of jointed together in a bone structure, and the solvers give you the possibility to kind of sway them and basically export then those particles back into Max and skin the trees to their bones, to the exported particles, so to say. So this is really cool. So you can use it in many ways and be very creative about your problem solvings with thinking particles. All right, I'll skip the rest. The last one was floating debris in water, where we used thinking particles to make debris float on the water, so it follows the surface. But it doesn't just follow it, it actually, instead of having a pivot, we were able to put like sensors inside the shape. And then if you have a surface, it would basically, all the surface would try to get on the water, and it would align on the water, but not by a pivot, but by multiple pivots, so to say. They all try to get to the surface and align kind of, the shape to the water. And then because we have an RBD solver inside, the shapes would push against each other. So if we have like a lot of shapes stuck on top of each other, they would kind of push and sink, and then it would all kind of sink and then rotate and go back to the surface. So you have like, it can be so creative, and that's the cool thing I love about effects. You can do so many things. All right, TP was also shown in the Heart of the Sea. Yes, this is true. Heart of the Sea, 300. Actually, next I'm going to talk about 300. Let's go a little bit deeper into, now we have seen, okay, thinking particles can do a lot of things. I mean, it's great, it's fun. Let's have a look how we approach a little bit more the effect side by using thinking particles. Oh, this one stuck as well. Sorry for that, folks. No, the 300 blood is not thinking particles. So here are the big effect shots from 300. So when we started working on this show, we didn't know exactly what's going to happen. And basically, one of the major effects was obviously the ships, right? And I can't even replay it. Okay, well, sorry for that, but I'll still go into the detail. So basically, we didn't know what's going to happen, and the input was, okay, there's going to be ships crashing, and we don't know exactly from which side, what's going to happen, but we know they're going to crash into each other, and we need to make them, like, destroy themselves. And when you get this task, you basically have to step back and think, okay, what does that mean? How many shots are we going to have? How are we going to approach this? I mean, and then you start, okay, let's get a ship, and the ship is, all right. So basically, when we started to work on it, we tried to simulate full ships, like full 10,000 pieces, everything, constraints and joints to everything, and simulations would become very, very slow, and just would not be, if you have an overnight simulation and you have to output a lot of shots, you just can't, you can't have slow simulations, especially if you have, if you have comments, a lot of comments, you have to change, and then you wait the whole night until you get a result. It's not good. So we came up with a solution where we use a cage, basically. So you have like an inner bone structure of the ship, and then the the inner structure has maybe like 200-300 pieces, or maybe 500, but still it's like a huge difference to 10,000. And I think one of the ships was even like 20,000 or something. And basically you can simulate very quickly the cage inside, and it gives you like bending and information, and like big structures have always like this flexing, like wood doesn't just break, it actually first bends, and then it goes, So this kind of setup lets you do this. And then basically you take the whole 10,000 pieces and you just attach them to this inner big structure. And it looks like they're bending, but they're actually not. They're all just kind of, you know, they're just kind of turning a little bit. And then if you have like a big chain of that, it just looks like it's bending. So this was really cool. We went down from like, you know, a whole night to like 20 minutes, which is a huge improvement. But then you want to have more detail where stuff breaks. You want to have like, you know, go another level into it. So basically we decided, okay, now when things start splitting off, we want them to start breaking. We want them to these 10,000 pieces that are, you know, starting to split off, we want to activate them and bring them into the simulation. And then they start jointing together. And then, you know, you get like things like, you know, it bends, 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 and then the first one flips off, and then the second one, and the third one, and so on. So you get this really cool effect. So this is another level of simulation. So that gave us kind of control to simulate. But then we faced the problem that the model is way too high res. When you start simulating with this high resolution model, you're like, again, going up in time. So we had to figure out a way to have simpler proxy objects and then simulate with the proxy objects. And then basically after the simulation, apply the high res mesh, which was, for me, it was the first time to do this, and it was like, it was a challenge to figure that out. But then once we had that, we had a chip like this, like a simulation, between 1.5 and 2.5 hours. We had it out. And if you have, you know, 2.5 hours, let's say, for the sim, and then you throw 3 or 4 sims on the farm, 3 hours later, you get sims, you can judge what did work and what didn't. And then you go to the next step. And that way, within like a few days, you can have a final version if your animation is locked. So this is really cool approach. So basically, you know, you start with basic animation, like really like rough, and then you go into the detail. And then once you have the detail and you lock that, you can go into splinters. And then you know, wherever stuff breaks off, you emit splinters. But that's not all. These ships, I mean, they're very complex. So now they have oars. Boat. So you can have another simulation level where you just have the oars reacting to the boat. You have the masts. The masts have sails and ropes, and then you have all the people on top and all the props on top, like the shields, the swords, the boxes, whatever cannons, or whatever there was in the boat. So all of this needed to be simulated on top of the simulation of the whole boat. You can simulate the base cage with keyframes. What we did, we actually had like 2 big point helpers, and then we animate those, and then the cage around those point helpers would be linked, locked, and then the rest would just kind of, you know, do dynamic stuff. So yeah. So basically, we also had to figure out the system of how to give all of these boats to the other departments, like the cloth simulation, the crowd guys, the water simulation. So Thinking Particles allowed to do that all within, like, you know, in a setup, you set it up and then you just hit the button once the simulation's done, and then it exports everything out, which was great. Yeah. So we were able to export data where the ropes and the sails are attached, and we would give this to the cloth department. And this is, might have heard of JC's. He was together with the rigging department. He basically set up a system where they could take our information from Thinking Particles, bring it into simulation, simulate those cloth, and then basically cache the cloth out. And then when we put the TP cache with the cloth cache together, it would just all seamlessly work together and I think it was just a great result. I was very, very excited. It was very challenging, very stressful, but then at the end, we were like super happy about our result, and we were all like, you know, tapping each other on the shoulder. And it was just a great, fun experience. For me, one of the most challenging projects. And then another thing that we did on the show were, yeah, the floating stuff. So this was really, really fun project. Maybe I can show. So here's a little R&D, basically how the floating works. So basically you have all these points and they all try to get on the surface. And then you attach these points to the shapes and you drive the shapes with the points using the solvers. And you can see the shapes are not just pivoting, like they're not just the point is going to the surface, they're all trying to align. And at the same time, they're colliding with each other. So we went even to the point where we took characters, and you know how the characters have animation controls for the artists. Well, we basically just took these animation controls and controlled them with thinking particles. So the characters would just like float on the water, and then if a shape came from below, you just push the character up and it would lay on the shape, like, you know, fainted kind of sailors on a piece of barrel. And it was really fun. Like, it was just so much fun to do this stuff. So this is kind of the effects that I really like to do. All right. I think we've got enough of 300 and yeah. So let's have a look how I would suggest learning. Never enough. Thank you. Here's how I would suggest learning thinking or effects in thinking particles. First of all, don't be afraid to try things out. You can just, you know, if you have an idea, just go for it. And personally, I find the best way of learning is learning by doing. Have yourself a project, a simple project, doesn't matter if it's fireworks or just, you know, a few cubes falling on the ground, and then breaking, and then, you know, you can step it up a notch and emit some dust or whatever you want. Or if you want to start with the building, in the end, even a big building simulation or a ship breaking consists of a lot of small simulations, small setups. So it doesn't matter where you start. Be confident of and just, you know, want to do it, and then start doing it. And then if you face a problem, go into the forums, ask questions, ask bold questions sometimes. Don't be afraid, just go for it. And you will have fun, you will learn. And even if you don't succeed with the project, you will still learn so much just by, you know, exploring the internet of information. And then, of course, there's like tons and tons of YouTube videos and Vimeo and Eat 3D. Crystal Vela did a DVD on thinking, or 2 DVDs on thinking particles. I think there's a CMI VFX. Joe and I did a TP DVD, which is online on Vimeo now. I'll see if I can put links together and then give it to Native Puppet so you can find those later. Yeah, so Joe Scar did a lot of videos, like for almost every node in thinking particles describes what it does, how it works, the whole TP structure. I mean, there's a lot of information out there, and you can go and just grab it anytime you want. So, and then of course forums, there's always forums. When you ask questions in the forums, I would strongly suggest ask the question, say what you initially want to do, like what is it that you want to do, where's the problem, and then put at least the video or the actual max file out there. Because then the person who wants to answer your question can actually open it up on his place and see the problem, maybe solve the problem and give it back to you. So I think this is the best way of learning.